So I was working like crazy, and I was at the mall with my friend to just kind of relax. And I got called from a tenant who told me that her unit burned down and the fire department was there.
Welcome to the American Dream Builder and Investor podcast, where our vision is to inspire busy professionals, especially first and second generation immigrants and Americans, to explore the state of the American dream in 2022 and beyond. That is the trinity of freedom: time, geography, and financial freedom. Super excited here for a great show and episode. This time we'll have my dear friend and also investor and also IT professional, Tina Nguyen. Tina is a successful IT professional in the security space. She's also a real estate investor, health enthusiast. However, she came from a very humble beginning after migrating from Vietnam with her family at the age of 9 years old and growing up with financial insecurities. Today, she's not only an accredited investor, helps with her mother's finances, and also has achieved financial independence for herself. Her portfolio consists of residential properties, 6 apartment syndications, hotel syndications, ATMs, and a couple of REITs. She has also started a travel blog called Petite Travel Blog. So Tina, for this episode, we really just want to dive into kind of your upbringing, how you achieved the American dream and whatever that means to you. So to start with, walk us through kind of your background of coming to the US, what that was like, and how that led you to some of the decisions you made thus far in your life.
Well, so as you mentioned earlier, I came to the US from Vietnam at the age of 9 years old. And when I grew up in Vietnam, we had a lot of financial insecurity. We really didn't know when would be our next meal. And so I grew up watching that, and just it's kind of stuck in my head. As a kid, you really don't know what you don't know. So that was just part of life at the time. And so I didn't think anything of how to be better, anything like that. And then when we came here, and I basically grew up here, I went through grade school, 3rd grade, 4th grade. And as I got older, I started to just interact with other people, and seeing their financial situations was different. The same kids in my class had very different upbringings. I would go to their house and would see the house was completely different than ours. Their meals were different than ours. And I think that's when it triggered to me that there was a difference in I guess you can call it economic class. And that's when I realized at the time when I was younger, I didn't realize how financially insecure we were, because that was just part of life. And then as I got older, I realized that was the case. So that's kind of triggered me into, how do I get to the right school? How do I get to the right degree? And my American dream, so to speak, at the time was just to finish college, get the best job I could get, and the great pay, so that I didn't have to live in that same world that I grew up in.
Yeah, I think those financial incentives can sometimes be a very strong incentive, especially when it impacts the meals you're eating and the clothes you're wearing. And it's a very interesting perspective. And how did you start the shifting of, you went into school, I assume you chose IT profession, partially also because especially security, it's one of the most secure jobs you can get as well from a risk standpoint. And how did you get into real estate investing? And maybe also adding the piece that we mentioned before about your identities, how all that played an effect in the choices you made.
How I came into real estate side it's another couple of years after that. So the first few years I worked really hard trying to getting promoted and just be good at what I was, because I wanted to add value. And I kept hearing about 401k, and if you just max out your 401k, or if you put in a few $100s every paycheck or something like that, and then by the time you retire, you'll be a millionaire and all that stuff. So 5 years after, I tried to save for a house, because one of my American dream was to get a house to live in, because I was still in an apartment at the time. So while I was doing that, I was also trying to save as much as I can to my 401k. Well, then 5 years after that, I'm looking at my 401k and I'm trying to calculate, and I'm like, they keep saying that I hear 8 to 12% of return. Well, I'm looking at it and it wasn't returning 8 to 12% within the 5 years. And I'm like, that doesn't work. So here I am sitting thinking, well, if this is the case, then when I'm retired, I'm not going to be able to retire financially well. And again, that financial insecurity was still in the back of my head. And I grew up just saving, trying to figure out what's the best way to be financially independent. But all that was playing in the background, and I really didn't take any action, because at the time I didn't know anything about alternative investing like real estate, syndication, nothing about that, until there was a situation that forced me to actually get out of my comfort zone and studied about it. And it was when I had a new manager that came onto the team, and I had a teammate that I didn't get along with. And there was a lack of integrity there that I'm not going to get into. But I sat there thinking, I'm not getting along with my manager. I'm not getting along with my senior team member. The next layoff that the company have, I would be the next one out. And so by that time, I was kind of supplement my mom's financial situation. I wanted her to retire early, and I had enough to help her successfully retire a few years earlier than planned. And I'm like, I'm not going to get into that situation where I can't support my mom and I can't support myself. And so long story short, I came upon the book called The Miracle Morning, and it was by Hal Elrod. And it wasn't anything about religion or anything like that, but it was basically about the morning routine where you start the morning routine and it helps set the rest of your day. And at that time, I was fairly stressed trying to figure out all these things and how to work with my current team. And so I would get up and then I would start exercise a little bit. And that's when I shifted toward into the health world as well. And then I started reading books to develop myself. And then I just kind of came upon real estate investing. And I was like, what is this? And so I started reading. And the more I read it, the more it makes so much sense. It's like a whole new world to me. It's like, okay, so if you do this, then you make $200-300 cash flow per month. And that makes sense to me. And so within 6 months of studying, I went and got my first foreclosure property. I fixed it up with my friends and then we were successful. So I started buying more single family homes. And then I bought 6 duplexes. And then soon after that, I started hearing more about multifamily. And so I started listening to it and I'm like, well, that makes sense too. And so I kind of shifted toward from single family homes into multifamily syndication. And then I went from there. And so my American dream actually moved from having a house, having a financially secure job, because by this time we all know that there's no such thing as financially secure job, right? Because at this time my company was laying people off once a year, and there was one year that people would lay out, like there were 2 layoffs. And so I had to figure out a way to find another thing that would help me, give me the passive income to float me indefinitely, so to speak, if I were to be laid off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes fear can be a powerful tool.
It is.
It
It
can
is a
drive you
powerful
towards the
tool.
direction you really want to go.
But here's the thing. I hate living in fear, because all my life, like I didn't realize it, but that financial insecurity was causing the fear in the back of my head all the time. And I just didn't realize it. And so as I got older, I was running away from that fear, right? And I didn't even recognize that until I hit the part where the layoff was ongoing and I didn't get along with my manager and my teammate. That's when I'm like, okay, I need to face this fear. And instead of being fearful about it, I'm going to do something that I could be empowered by my own action instead of allowing other to make me fearful. Mm-hmm. So you're right, it is a very powerful tool, but we all have to face it.
Mm-hmm. So as you're making all those changes, going into college and working really hard and learning about investment and Miracle Morning, I know it's another topic you're passionate about. So as you were making all those changes, what was like a guiding compass, right? Like, because it wasn't like I'm going to work my way up to the chief security officer. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like you were very clear about what your core identities were, what you wanted to achieve, and it just took on different roles to help you get there. So what was that guiding compass? What were your core identities that helped you take those steps?
So while I was still working, I mean, at all this time that I was doing the real estate, I was still very working hard with my job, because I knew that I needed that job and I need to do well on that job to not be laid off, right? And to make money so that I could take it and invest into real estate syndication where I could get the passive income. So to me, that's always a priority. I've never dropped it. In fact, I shifted from family rentals, like the single family homes, to multifamily syndication was because of my job, because I couldn't shift my focus to single family homes. So I had to go find somewhere else that was more passive investment. So I knew my priority. The whole guiding thing here, and this is where the other identity that you mentioned earlier about being a Christian. When I did the morning routine, one of the things I did was asking God to guide me. And I really, truly believe that he guided me to where I am today and continue to guide me here. There wasn't any, like, he's always there. Even when I had difficulties with some of my rentals, there were always someone kind of come in and kind of help me, or would listen to a podcast and there's something come up that helped me deal with that situation. And the other thing is there, you don't always see 10 steps ahead, right? You see 1 or 2 steps ahead. So I would see, okay, this is where I want to be. At first I got the single family home and it was giving me, let's say $300 cash flow. So I'm like, if I repeated this about 5 times, then that's enough for me to pay very basic needs. If I repeat this 10 times, it's enough to pay pretty much all my basic needs plus my mom. And so that was kind of like what I follow with. It's like I see a couple of steps ahead and I just took the action. And that's the important thing, is that you can study and you can learn all you want and all you need, but if you don't take that action and get to the next step and then take more action to get to the next step, you will never get there. So I knew that was the case, and I knew God wanted me to be brave and just take the steps and trust that it's going to work, and then take the next step. And there were a lot of things I learned in the meantime. I'm still constantly learning today. I mean, every time I go out for a run, I'm always listening to some kind of podcast about health, about financial, about real estate investing, about any kind of investing that I could find that I think that I would be interested in.
Yeah, and for those that doesn't really know about some of the things that she mentioned, like multifamily syndications or just passive investing, it's essentially a group purchase that helps busy professional who has the net worth and liquidity to invest $50,000, $100,000 in it, having their money grow, but not having to deal with tenants and toilets, being more of a tax advantaged option. If that's something you're interested, then we do, through my company, Life Mission Capital, we do help with that. But not to deviate away from the conversation, but wanted to give people background, because what you did in pursuit of your freedom, right, from kind of more of the monetary needs and to help fulfill the need you felt like that came from the financial insecurity as a child, which is more monetary, but later on you went more towards time freedom, because it wasn't just money, it was about time. So
Absolutely.
I wanted to kind of mention that, because your shift from your investment options of retiring earlier, getting your time back earlier, and also shift from single family dealing with tenants and toilets to more passive investing is also a shift in time. So I found it interesting that as you went along the process, you realized that what you really needed, it wasn't just the monetary needs, it was how you can free up your time so you can do more meaningful activities for you and your family.
Yeah, that is an awesome summary, because when I was buying the duplexes and I was trying to manage them myself and thinking I would save the money to not give it to a property manager. And it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then. And I remember I was at the mall with my friend, and here I was working 45 to 60 hours a week on my full-time job and then managing this after hours. So I was working like crazy, and I was at the mall with my friend to just kind of relax. And I got called from a tenant who told me that her unit burned down and the fire department was there. And I just kind of like, what, in my head, I was still trying to absorb the information. And my friend would be asking like, what's the call was about? And I'm like, one of my units just burned down. And I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry, but that really did happen. And, insurance took care of that and all that stuff. No one got hurt, which was important. But then that got shift my focus. And I'm like, I can't continue working 20 to 30 hours a week on this things that's supposed to free me up while still having to work 50 hours a week on this one. And so I think that's when my mindset shifted to, how do I do this so that I can be free from actively spending my time in order to make money? So you are right that originally I was working hard to make money. Now I had to shift it to, how do I get the money to work for me while I'm asleep, while I'm spending time with people that are important to me?
This podcast is sponsored by Life Mission Capital, founded by me, Micy, where my life mission is to help busy professionals invest well so they can focus on what matters. All my life, I was taught to study and work hard for my freedom, until one day I realized that unless I let my money work hard for me, I will always be trading my most precious resource, time, for freedom. Since then, we have also been helping our investors passively diversify into more than 1,000 units of recession and inflation-resistant alternative investments, such as multifamily, mobile home parks, short-term rentals, and more. Learn more with our free ebooks at lifemissioncapital.com.
Yeah, and I would love to dive into that. So with your passive investment, or your shifting mindset of doing that to invest more passive to free up time, so what are the things you've been able to do more of because of that? Give me some examples, because I know there's a lot of things you're passionate about.
So like I said, I'm still working actively on my daytime job. 9 to 5 or whatever you call it. It's probably more like 8 to 6 for that kind of job, and the weekend and being on pager. But it'll also allow me to take my health back. And that's another thing that is extremely important for me, is that as I was going through this whole process, when I read The Miracle Morning, it wasn't just about making money, it was about your health. It was about my health. And at that time, throughout my teenage years, all the way till working as a professional, I was in a bad health. And I mean, you couldn't tell by looking at me because I was still thin, but I was tired all the time. I was fighting this lethargy that I didn't understand where it was coming from. And every single time I would be on call, I would lose like 5 pounds, and I couldn't figure out why I was losing weight so quickly. I didn't know. And I always wonder, how do people have enough energy to just go throughout the day? And here I was fighting with being tired all the time. But then I started listening to health podcasts, fitness podcasts, and that's when I started exercising. That's when I start to kind of unlearn the conventional teaching of the food pyramid and all that. That's absolutely what I don't agree with. But anyway, that's another topic. But I had to unlearn what I learned since I was in grade school and started fixing my health. And that helped took my health back, my life back, and my quality of living got better, and sleep got better. And sleep is one of those important things that I try not to compromise unless I'm on pager and there's nothing I can do about it being paged in the middle of the night. But that whole part of I'm working, but when I'm not working, I want to focus on my health. I want to go run. I want to go to the park and just spend time with my cats or whatever it is. So that's something that's important, instead of trying to text back my tenants, or my tenants texting me saying the toilet is plugged up, what do we need to do, or things like that. And I have to go call somebody and get that fixed. That freed up my whole mental energy.
That makes sense. Yeah, time is important. That's one of the most precious resources in the world.
Yes, we can always make more money, but we can't get back the time that we lost, especially with the people we love.
Yes, that is indeed very important. And you took on a profession that's very demanding profession, right? Being on pager. It is also a very lucrative profession, as it's in huge demand in the job market. How do you feel like, to you, a job is just a job? It's a tool to help you get to where you are? Or is this like, I'm really passionate about IT security? And I ask that because one of the earlier guests I interviewed, she's 19 years old, and feel free to check out the episode if you haven't, with Iya. I don't know which quarter will release the episode yet, but she's 19 years old and she did multifamily investing. And I think this is just a tool. There's many other things I may be more interested and passionate about, but I'm okay with it just being a tool. How do you view that as you stand outside, look at all those different elements of things you've done?
So when I first started working as a professional, I loved it, right? I wanted that to be my passion. And I spent just a lot of energy focusing on that because I thought you should love your job and all that. But as I got older and as I worked more, I'm thinking I can still make that as something I love, but it doesn't have to be my whole identity. Right, because when I shifted, all my whole life was, my identity was from grade school, college, all the way to now I'm a professional, and that was my identity. And I think I got stuck with that identity until I started to just more self-development and seeing myself as someone more than just an IT professional. I mean, I don't even identify. I don't tell people I'm an IT professional. I just kind of say I work in an IT department, but I'm more than that. I see myself as someone who cares about health and want to make that awareness for other people, someone who value financially independent and time independent, patient independent. And so there's more to me than just my job. Now, with that said, I still think it's important. I do agree it is a tool that provides us the income to take care of what we need to do. But it's also, I think, in a way, if you like your job, and you love your job, you love the people you do with, it makes your quality of life so much better. And for me, it's not just about the job. I also like to be able to add the value and figure out what skill sets I need to learn, because there's a lot of things that I learn at my job that helps me with real estate, like the interaction with people, the meeting, the negotiation that I do at work that helps me transition that to work with other people in real estate. So I think that skill set that you get in your job is also very important. And my goal in my job at any time is always, am I adding value, right? Because if you're not adding value, then what are you really doing in that job? Is it time for you to go find another job that you like better, that you have the right skill set, or learn the right skill set in order to be able to add value? I just don't want to be someone who is complacent and just being there to do the minimum that I could, just for the money to go invest somewhere else, because I don't think that's the right mindset. I'd like to be able to, at the end of the day, every day, to say, hey, I helped this person, or I did something that helped for my company to be successful.
That makes sense. Yeah, make sure it's a fair exchange of the work that you did
Yes.
and the compensation they're giving you. Yeah,
Yep.
that's important as well. So I have maybe a last one or two questions, then we're going to the final rounds of questions. The next question I have for you is, because you're a female, minority female in the tech world, and then going to profession has challenges, and with your upbringing, perhaps it has another set of challenges. Maybe talk through your challenges in the real estate world as well.
I didn't know what I didn't know. The only thing I knew was my 401k wasn't doing well, even though it was doing the time that was supposed to go up, but it wasn't going up to the speed that I wanted to go up. So the challenge was, I really didn't know there was a whole world of real estate. And so once I shift that, and I'm like, if there is this, then there's more. And so that's when I realized how important continuous learning was. Because after college, I think I stopped learning. I'm thinking, I don't have homework, I don't have final exam, I don't need to learn anything except things at my work. But then once I learned about real estate, I realized how important it is to constantly develop ourselves, whether that's self-development about professional or about things that are important to you. And health and real estate was important to me, because they're tools that allow me to have better quality of living. That's why I'm very passionate about telling people about real estate, about health. Specifically, the challenges I have in real estate is that at the time, I didn't have the actual physical community. I didn't have parents who have done real estate before. I didn't have friends. In fact, I have a friend whose parents used to do single family homes, and he hated it. He said he didn't want to call, and people that I talked to who had sort of done it before kind of persuade me not to go into real estate. But when I read it and I knew what I want, I just did it anyway. And none of the people who I talked to about real estate, they didn't know anything about multifamily syndication, right? And so to them, real estate is a very active, and it's another job that they took upon themselves. So of course they hated it, because you already have a job, now you have a second job that you only get calls when things are broken. And so they never knew about multifamily. And because I took the initial step of learning about single family homes, and then constantly listening to podcasts, then I learned more about, multifamily investing. And that's when I jumped to that, and that helped free up my time.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, and creating a community, if you don't have one near you, you're the average of the 5 people around you. And if the average of the 5 people around you is not what you want to have, you may have to change things up a little bit. So great. We're getting to the last few questions in our firing rounds of questions. So first question is, you probably have answered this a little bit already. What is your life mission, the underlying motivation behind everything that you do today?
It's having the quality of living, the best quality that I have the time that I need in order to spend time with the people that I have.
Got it. So if you were to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
If I have to do all over again, and knowing all that I know today, like still regaining my knowledge as of today, I would probably start with multifamily syndication. I would not start with single family homes and learning all that, unless I know there's going to be a huge appreciation on those. Then in that case, I would do it. But other than that, if it's mainly for the financial independence and having the time to do what I want, I would just start with multifamily syndication.
Yep, understand passive investing.
Yep,
helps make it actually truly passive. Yeah. Next question: what book has had the greatest influence in your life?
Without a doubt, that's The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. That has shifted my whole world, basically. Without that book, without that practice of the morning, where I got up in the morning and start exercising and then just figure out what my goals were and developing myself, I wouldn't be here today at all. I wouldn't have even met you, probably.
Thank you, Miracle Morning, and the book, for such a wonderful friend. Okay, next question. What is the number one piece of advice you would give to anyone looking to achieve more control of their time, their finances, their career, and live their American dream based on their or your definition?
Multifamily syndication. I mean, learn about it, figure it out. If you want, that is passive, but if you want to go into something more active, there's a way for that. You just start getting into it, learning the arts of doing it, and it's probably will free you up more time than if you were to go get a 9-to-5 job.
Got it. Do you have a dish from your home culture, Vietnam in this case, that you like to share with the audience? It's a fun question I like to ask.
That is a surprise one. So if you ever gone to a Vietnamese restaurant, you would probably heard of a dish called pho, right? However, I can make pho at home if I want to. There's the other dish that's slightly less well known that most people don't know about, even if they go to Vietnamese restaurants, called bún bò Huế. And it's a lot, to me, I don't know, there's a specific seasoning in there that I just really like. So that is one dish that I love aside from pho.
What's in it? Just quickly, yeah.
So it's the same beef broth, but it has a lot more of different types of meat, and it has a different types of noodles. And the noodles that they have, I just like it better. It's still rice noodles, so it's just completely different seasoning. Let's just say, so it's still like kind of like beef noodle soup, but it's just very different seasoning. And they do have other types of meat on there as well.
It's called bún bò Huế.
Yeah, bún bò Huế.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Our last question: if our listener want to get in contact with you, what's the best way? Perhaps follow you on social media.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think my user ID is like Tina Nguyen, FIRE. It stands for Financial Independent Retire Early. And so I just thought I'd put that in my user ID just to make it stand out, instead of, because there's a lot of, my last name is fairly common in Vietnam. And so there are probably a bunch of Tina Nguyen on LinkedIn. So I put the FIRE part in there, and that really represents, in a way, of my mission in life.
Got it. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Tina. That's a wrap on this episode, and I appreciate you answering all the questions and sharing that with the audience. And it's been very inspiring. So thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you again so much for tuning into the American Dream Builder and Investor podcast with me, Micy Liu. We hope you enjoy the tips and tricks that others have used to build their American dream and their trinity of freedom. We would love for you to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can also find all the podcast episodes and details on lifemissioncapital.com. Until then, let your life mission go wild.